So this is turn 16 of I equipped my heavy crossbow. So the first thing to note is that I launched my preemptive attack on Marignon under the assumption that he was attacking me, but it seems as though he didn't do that. Well, we were planning on fighting Mary anyways. We don't necessarily have everything in position for this war, but yeah, since we were planning on doing this war anyways, we may as well get it started. So I have my front line here, which is some indie infantry and my sacreds. I actually am not really properly set up for fighting another player in that I don't have my crossbowmen in skirmish formation yet. But in this fight I wasn't really aiming for Marignon's army anyways, I'm just fighting his province defense. It looks like he put up 10 PD over here, so that's pretty standard. Marignon's province defense isn't all that tough in terms of the units. He's just got these city guards here who they're basically militia. They have a castle defense bonus, which doesn't really apply to province defense. And their weapon is high damage, but they have low attack and defense skills. And then, of course, they have crossbows as well. Between their high damage weapons and their armor-piercing crossbows, they can actually be annoying for heavy infantry nations. And as we saw, they killed 6 of my frontline heavy infantry chaff. But on the other hand, that's pretty much why I bought those guys, is so that they can die so that my sacreds and other more valuable units don't. In the Moon Sea, my big blob of tritons did their job. So, as I'd mentioned when I was attacking, or ordering the attack on this place, the sea trolls here have very high HP and regeneration, which makes them actually quite useful as frontliners. They also have 2 attacks, their attack density is okay, but their combat stats aren't that great. So they have average defense, below average attack, and rather low protection as well. This indie province is guarded by this guy, but since he's only water 2, and the AI for whatever reason doesn't like the path buffing spells, he's not going to be able to use it to summon a size 6 water elemental. The Kraken over here is along the same lines as those sea trolls in that it has a lot of HP, but unlike the sea trolls, it has more attacks, no regeneration, and is larger, so it's a size 6, takes up a square to his own. You can basically think of this as a square of 2 sea trolls in terms of its combat value, except it doesn't regenerate. So the sea trolls are actually able to hold off a huge group of these tritons for a reasonable amount of time. But they're on their own, they're completely surrounded, and yeah, when you have low protection like that, you'll eventually get worn down. And then here we just have our armored tritons taking on the unarmored indie tritons, so no trouble there. And then here, this is just an independent province. It has a fair number of crossbowmen and these relatively tough heavy infantry, so 16 damage, 16 prot. And we lose some of our independent chaff over here. But otherwise no trouble. We yeah, just lose 1 blind fighter as well. And now we've essentially come across the extent of Gath's territory. So judging from the fact that Gath built a fort over here, and that we saw that his border was actually going up over here, we know that Gath's capital has to be somewhere in this area, which actually puts it very close to TNG, and also somewhat close to our holdings right over here. But in order to make Gath feel more comfortable, we're going to pull these guys over here, tell Gath that we don't want no trouble, that sort of thing. Given that Gath is over here, I'm guessing that he and TNG might be fighting. But either way, we haven't heard any complaints from Gath, which can be a bad thing, but I mean, since we have been in active communication with them, I don't actually anticipate any trouble with them. TNG over here is still focused on sieging down Man's capital, while Man's Ghost King continues doing raiding, essentially, in order to prevent TNG from getting the income from their capital, and yeah, just intending to cause damage to the raiders. TNG's Barbarian Heavy Horse over here is probably going to just need to move over this way until he's actually succeeded in capturing that in order to put down that Ghost King who's been stirring up trouble for them. As a result of his war with Man and the fact that Man is actually fighting back somewhat effectively, TNG is actually not all that large. So I don't actually expect him to launch an invasion of me or anything. Arcocephaly and Ulm are still fighting. There's even a large battle over here. Oh yeah, we can take a look at that. So in this fight, Arco lost a little bit more than Ulm, mostly because these war elephants are very expensive. Generally, when you are using war elephants, you can expect the war elephants to go towards the enemy formation. So when you're fighting a province that has province defense, you can expect the war elephants to move towards the middle if they're not there already. As a result, when you're using a combination of war elephants and regular troops, it's usually a good idea to put the war elephants near the center and the regular troops on the side. The reason for this is that when tramplers rout, war elephants included, they're going to trample over allied units between them and their exit. War elephants have a fairly low base morale, only 9 base morale, so, like militia tier rather than even regular unit tier. So it's fairly easy to make them rout, especially if you're using fear effects, like the spells Fear, Terror, Panic, and so on. And then because elephants have such a high HP pool, they actually draw evocation more than regular units do. So, yeah, generally once you start going up against magic, you can kind of expect your elephant squads to rout. And while you can make your elephants better with spells that buff them up, like Body Ethereal, Haste, Flight, that sort of thing. So when you're actually using the elephants on your own, you want to, or I found it's best to put troops on the flanks and elephants in the center, because if you do the opposite, then your flanking squads of elephants are going to shift towards the center once they find their target, and then retreat over your own dudes. So I'm not a huge fan of Arco formation here. In this case, he actually left a lane for the elephants to retreat to, so he actually got a bit lucky there, because they routed round 1, and they hadn't yet moved anywhere. So, while it's unfortunate that this little squad of 2 elephants routed, when you have less than 6 units per squad, that's something that can happen quite often. He is lucky that they didn't move a bit, because otherwise they would have run over this little indie militia dude's squad over here, or potentially even these crossbowmen over here. With those elephants out of the picture, Arco has a very, very weak front line. So Peltasts are his weaker infantry units. These are like light infantry with spears and so on. So while they have a javelin attack, they're also just not very well protected. Yeah. Okay. And then, yeah, once these elephants, or if these elephants are not routed, of course, they're still size 6 tramplers. They can do a lot of damage, as you can see. They just kind of tore right through Ulm's infantry line right there. Ulm seems to have scripted his rangers for fire and keep distance. That means that they're going to back away when guys get too close, and then they're going to launch their crossbow bolts. Fire and keep distance can cause some issues in that it will sometimes make your guys retreat off the edge of the map, since they're just trying to, gain space. In this case, though, it works out fine. Like, he doesn't seem to have any trouble with it. And yeah, so even though the elephant squad has been significantly reduced, there's only 3 of them left over here, they actually seem to be doing well in their morale checks. This might just be on account of the fact they've got a bunch of experience, so I'm guessing that these are elephants that were used from expansion. But even though 2 of these guys are almost dead, they still haven't routed. Eventually they do, though, and as we saw over here, Ulm's very limited, Arco's very limited front line was basically broken past by the squad of Pikeneers. And then once they did that, then, they're in amongst the archers already, so it was fairly easy for them to cause the regular troops to rout while the elephants are doing all the fighting. So yeah, or if you include province defense, Ulm definitely had a lot more here in the fight, even just counting gold value. Those elephants definitely did a lot of work. That's an advantage that's going to definitely need to be countered with magic. I mean, you definitely just want magic as your answer to war elephants regardless. So as a result, Ulm took actually fairly significant losses, but he was able to hold his capital for now. Locust swarms. So these can be caused by a spell, but here it's almost certainly caused by an event. It's not a huge deal, just some unrest. If someone were actually casting it, they would be like spamming it on my capital or something to turn off recruitment, but yeah. Okay, so we know that Marignon's army, because it was here and disappeared, like we don't see it, we know it's over here. So no surprises there. We're going to be going over here to cut off the income that he's got from these provinces. And we're going to leave only one guy here in order to hold the fort. We see that we've started to destroy the gate, which means that he has relatively few units inside of the castle. And that's good because we actually don't have a lot of guys. So we're going to be moving over this army of non-sacreds led by the commander over here. We're going to be using a couple of these cave knights. And we basically just bought these guys just because they don't have, or because we wanted a front line that wasn't sacred so that we could recruit them from this fort while the temple was still going up. Now that we have the temple, Thurismund here can start leading these blind fighters out. But we did have a turn where, we needed to get some frontliners that weren't those guys, so we got some cave knights instead. And cave knights are actually quite good at creating an evocation lore, because when they die, they leave behind a high HP cave drake. So the knights themselves are very expensive for their stats. They don't function in the same role as regular cavalry because they only have map move 1 and combat move 7. They do have very high defense skill, especially compared to our, normally heavily armored Agarthans, and their encumbrance is mitigated by the fact that they are cavalry units. So defensively, they actually still work fine, just because they get hit slightly less. And their protection is, of course, great, like many Agarthan elite units. And then they also deal only slashing damage, so this can potentially be useful against Hydras if we were to want to send them into that. But as I mentioned, the real reason that you buy these guys is so that you can get the high HP Cave Drakes when they drop, because Cave Drakes are very resilient. And I was actually mostly like resource gated rather than gold gated, and getting these guys lets you spend more of your gold on combat power, because, it's got 90 gold cost. So here in this castle which finished, we're going to basically finish our heavy cavalry squad so that we can have at least a couple guys to use as flankers. And then we're going to switch over to blind fighter production from here as well. We know that our advantage over Marignon is our superior sacred, so we're definitely going to try to take advantage of that. And then because it's LA and it's, we're going to have lots of big crossbow versus crossbow battles. And yeah, right now, I'm at something of a positional disadvantage because my armies are kind of spread all over the place, and Marignon's armies are much closer to our border, since we saw that he had his big squad right over here. I definitely disapprove of deathballing like he's doing, but we'll see how that turns out. And then his capital's over here. Marignon doesn't really have a good way of getting underwater, so I'm not super worried about him launching an attack on my water province. So as long as Arco's cool with my keeping the main sea, I'm essentially uncontested on these provinces. And that's actually really awesome because it's essentially free income. So like I'd already hit my natural expansion limit, and then I'm drawing income from all these. And then some of them are actually quite good, and I'm still going to be able to get some more before everything's done. I'm still mass recruiting these Ichthyids. Eventually, I'm going to buy an Ichthyid commander, and then I'll be able to send them over this way to flank Marignon and either like raid in the area around his capital, or just provide extra siege power for taking on, or for bringing his capital walls down. And that's the turn. Alright, this is turn 17. Pythium is actually a little bit concerned about Arco, which I find kind of funny, because Pythium and I are both actually larger than Arco, even including Arco's new holdings on Ulm. I'm guessing he's trying to get the people who are currently second and third in size to fight each other if he's number one, or get me to fight Arco first rather than consider him my primary rival. Either way, I'm really not concerned about Arco. If anything, I think that the fact that he's stuck fighting Ulm is going to be good for me for now because it keeps him occupied and lets me focus on my fighting Marignon. Here I'm just taking an empty province, so, not a lot to see there. And then here, my Triton troopers actually do take some losses on account of the fact that there's a bunch of these Triton guards. But while they are outnumbered, they are better than the things that they're fighting, so no real trouble there. This is also a sort of empty province. He actually left some crossbowmen in here. So this was kind of a little bit of a weird thing. I had been talking to both Arco and Joman about killing Ulm early, but Joman did not want to fight Ulm himself, so he basically gave me permission to go through his territory here in order to invade Ulm over here. But I'm actually, mostly concerned with fighting Marignon, so I want to make sure that the Marignon front is totally in control before I actually commit troops to fighting Ulm. But because the deal with Jomina already went through, I decided to take this province for now. I might move up and take this throne as well, and I can decide from there whether or not I want to keep going and push Ulm, or if I just want to hold on to these and essentially be a barrier between Joman's southern front and Ulm, who he sort of wants to fight but doesn't want to actually deploy troops to fight against. So yeah, scouting-wise, we found that Gas Capital is in fact right over here. He still seems okay with letting me keep this, so, that's good. And then this is the last Indie province in this big ocean over here, so I'll be trying to take that with my mercenaries, given that it's their last turn, and if not, then the mercenaries can die, and that's fine too, and then I'll just, yeah, try to take it over with my regular Tritons, or lose my Tritons into it. We'll see how that goes. So, Man's researchers in LA are drain immune. So, I'm guessing that this is Man's Dominion over here, because this is his capital, and he's taken Drain Misfortune, which is a really terrible scale combination, because it can actually make you lose your gems, like, all your gems, potentially. It's awful. So here we can see that I was correct about Gath fighting Tianqi. By taking this province, he's sort of cutting him off. If Man owns this, then Tianqi doesn't get any income from either of these two provinces. Most importantly, Man's capital here, which provides a ton of money, even if he doesn't actually have the fort breached. And then here, similarly, Marignon is cut off, and I was right about where his army went. So, I don't actually think that I have enough juice here with this combination of guys, even with 20 province defense, to actually beat him, because my province defense is just heavy infantry, and yeah, I just don't have enough crossbows. So I have this mercenary group, a couple crossbows in here, and I'm recruiting basically as many as I can. My fort just finished, so I'm finishing up this indie crossbow that I had been getting, and then spending as much gold as I can on these light crossbows. Similarly, we are getting a bunch of blind fighters over here, and then a little bit of crossbow to fill up the gap over there. And then here we are getting, yeah, just blind fighters again. I did not set up a lab here yet, and I also don't have a temple to get my blind fighter, so he's building the temple now. I expect that once I do have everything here, that I'll actually be good to go as far as fighting Marignon's big old blob here. I'm not 100% sure what Mary's going to be doing. My knee-jerk reaction, though, is that he's going to try to free this fort. And given that he did have all his troops in one blob, I think that he might also be nervous about splitting up his army. If he has scouts, then he'll know that these guys are coming and so on. So if I were Mary, I might actually just be going to siege this fort over here, which is why I have my guys set over here to wait, and then send only a small group of people to basically serve as like a relief force to kick the one crossbowman off over here. So, like, he can even potentially use like a scout or something for that. So that's sort of the scenario that I'm planning for. I don't expect him to go for this, because this group has enough crossbows that he doesn't want to send, only a couple guys, like a squad of 6 guys or whatever, to take it, kill just province defense. So if he were to do this, then he would probably be sending most of his guys all together, and that's just not a good move. Unless he wants to split up into like 2 armies and hit here and here, then he's probably not going to hit this at all. And we can definitely not expect him to leave his army there, or even leave a significant number of troops there. And because anywhere else that he's going to go to, he'll most likely win, we're going to be basically attacking into it right over here. The reason that we're not attacking this province is that he can easily reinforce it from his capital over here. I believe that if he does attack this province at all, it's going to be from his capital, because he's got these royal navigators which have 40 leadership and can sail. Sailing essentially lets him move to any province that borders nearby water provinces, so he can hit all of these guys with his sailing guys. You can potentially hit like this coast too, but naturally he's not going to do that. So I basically expect that this attack here is going to succeed. And then meanwhile, the rest of this turn is basically just logistics, basically moving my guys all around in order to get everyone closer to the front. Here, on this front over here, we're just building our castle up, and it's almost finished, and then we'll build a lab. And once we have a reasonable amount of troops up here, then we can actually go maybe take on this throne province, depending on how Gath and Jomon feel about it. Research-wise, we are still just going into Conjuration. Because it's a difficult research game, we haven't made a huge amount of progress, so yeah, no real mage support yet, but we'll eventually have it on hand just in case we do need to use it. And we are going directly into Conjuration 5, which will let us summon size 6 elementals if we want them against Marignon. And while Flaming Crossbows might be a little bit more efficient, especially in terms of the number of mages and gems required, Flaming Arrows won't really do anything against Pythium, and I felt the need to have an answer to his Crazy Sacreds first, rather than mage support for my ongoing war. And that's the turn. Alright, this is turn 18 of Ekwipt, my heavy crossbow. Here, he used his entire army to kick that one poor little crossbowman off of the fort, and then, he had no commander, so he just ran away. This does let me get a look at Marignon's army. As expected, he's still using these crappy Sacreds as his frontline troops, and he's using just a lot of crossbows, as one does in LA. And he actually reminded me with his formation over here that I'm going to need to put my guys into skirmish formation. You can see that he's done that over here, so guys set to fire archers are not going to just immediately kill them. These guys over here, his royal guards, are rather expensive, but they actually have very high protection on account of their full plate mail. And their two-handed swords also do a fair amount of damage, so good stats if low magic resistance, but, 10 base isn't anything awful. High encumbrance, as one expects from heavily armored units. These guys actually have, like, supernatural hit points, because, they're, like, the jewel of the army. And these are generally what I use as my front line if I were to play LA Mary. The one mistake that he did make as far as his formation goes is that his High Inquisitor here is in amongst the archers, which means that he has a chance to get shot if I order my guys to fire archers, and he did the same with his Prophet over here. So you can definitely expect me to take advantage of this and use a fire archer strategy, in spite of the fact that many of those bolts are going to go to waste hitting those empty squares on account of his skirmish formation. So good job on him with the skirmish formation, but, gotta watch for his commander placement. Here, my Triton Troopers actually won in spite of the fact that the Indies have almost as many Triton Troopers and a bunch of Triton Guards as well. The reason that this is the case is that, I think just on account of my getting first hit, actually. That definitely helps. The other thing which I expect to be the case here is that once these guys are routed, then a significant portion of the Indie HP has already fled. And I think I also get fairly lucky with these poison spines. Oh, no, I killed the commander. That's what happened. Okay. I think. Oh, no, I didn't kill the commander. Yeah, so it must just be the HP route. So because they had a bunch of garbage units mixed in with their, like, actually useful units, once the garbage units fled, only a relatively small portion of their more heavily armored, actually useful Triton troopers had to die in order to trigger a route. So that's how we got rid of them, and we now own the entirety of that water area. So here we see Gath. Let's see what Gath has got going on. So Gath's formation isn't actually correct, because as you can see here, you want to mix these guys up, which are size 4, with these guys, which are size 2, so, you know, he has that going to some extent, but he also has this middle area here, where you've got just a bunch of humans and no giants in the square, which will leave some giants without human square fillers here on the flanks. So I actually sent him a message about fixing that, but anyways, his bless, he has a water 9, water 9, N9, E4 bless. So that's a pretty huge bless, which is to be expected since, like me, he has out-of-cap sacreds that he can use, namely these Levite zealots. And yeah, these guys aren't like anything particularly special, you know, they're just humans. They've got short swords and stuff. They have an okay defense skill, only 10 base, but they have a shield and a short sword to give them a defense modifier. So, including the shield and their bless, they have 19, which is actually respectable. Yeah, aside from that, I'm guessing he just plans on spamming them, and since he's going to be having a lot, he'll benefit from having that bless on them. These guys don't have great protection for giants. So 2 base, relatively little from their scale mail, hallmarks, and so on. So these guys can definitely get shot down by crossbows. Their high defense score means that they're going to be catching a lot of stuff on their shields, and their protection is high enough that, including the shield, they won't be like just dying outright. But they can still get whittled down by crossbows, and yeah. Once we get like a flaming crossbow skeleton thing going, I don't expect too much trouble with these guys in spite of their heavy bless. They don't need anything special the way that those hydras do. And yeah, I've been pretty active as far as like messaging people this game, so we've received a lot of messages as well. And then yeah, I was correct about him not leaving much behind here, so I'm able to take this. And now we're going to see what he's planning on doing. So I'm basically just going to gamble that he wants to hit this fort. I think I end up being wrong about this. Yeah, but I'm basically bringing everything together into one blob. Usually deathballing is a bad idea, but if your opponent's doing it and you can punish them for it by taking out their deathball, then, you know, may as well do that. So here I don't think I fixed my formations yet. Yeah, so I haven't gone through and actually fixed up my guys into skirmish formation as I should, but I do have the correct like angle of guys over here. Since he has a relatively small front line, as we saw, it's only taking up like a thin area towards the center of the screen. You want to make like a bowl with your crossbows here, which is why these guys here are like kind of a little bit forward, as are the guys up there at the top. Basically, this bowl is going to curl in so that they have like a roughly even range from the enemy squad from each of the sides. So that basically lets me get more bolts firing into the center. And yeah, I keep my province defense, my province defense here is relatively high. And up here, we bought these mercenaries, but because we have this enemy army from Marignon's capital coming up, I don't want to just throw away these mercenaries. I want them to actually be useful if possible. So I'm going to move them up here. I'm going to expect Marignon to take this with this group. These guys are going to try to basically just take over this province just to, you know, have the extra province. Maybe snipe some stuff from Man. We'll see how that war goes. And then potentially also, if I'm right, I'm going to be basically moving back onto this fort over here, and then the mercenaries can rejoin them if I don't feel the need to take over this quite yet. As far as the other wars go, Ulm has successfully repelled Arco's attacks to an extent, but here I get discovered by this giant force of Arcocephalus, so we can kind of see that Arcocephaly now has, he's starting to deploy at least one Mystic. Usually you see Mystics deployed by relatively large numbers so they can communion up and cast bigger magic, but it's fairly early on in the game. Actually, I don't know why he brought this Mystic. He might just be site searching with it. Yeah, he's not really doing a whole lot. I guess he's casting Starfire, so that's not useless. It's gonna do like a little bit of damage, kind of like having like another couple crossbowmen in there. It's usually not worth like the price of the mage compared to a regular troop, but you know, not the end of the world. Man tried to break siege. TNT has been kind of baiting him by like moving his army on and off that fort. But in this case, his army was there, and he just smashed him. So these are Man's guys. Defenders and Tower Guards are basically the go-to units for Man. The reason that these guys are so cool is that they're crossbowmen, but they still have shields. And that's very rare. So they're like competent melees, they're decent at taking crossbow hits, and then, you know, they have crossbows of their own. And defenders are essentially like the upgraded version of them. So they have more protection, better combat stats, but they also cost quite a bit of gold. They really do pay for this castle defense bonus. I personally only ever get the cheaper guys, because generally when you're building this type of troop, you care about having as many crossbow bolts in the air at a time as you can get. And then, yeah, you're basically relying on these kite shields here to help protect against enemy fire, rather than just being, like, super tanky. And then we already saw that TNT is basically using these guys as melee units, and when they're used in that respect, their lances and just high damage attacks in general can easily break through these guys who are just intended to be soaking relatively lower damaging hits. So this is another Order Misfortune event. We're going to be getting a lot of these because Order 3 Misfortune. And, oh, we found some magic sites. So this is a Death Gem site and an Earth Gem site. So that's nice. And I hope I didn't just leave this guy defending. I mean, even preaching would have been better than nothing. I don't remember what... Yeah, I think I might have. Basically, I'm not actually ready to commit to fighting Ulm yet because I don't know how my battle with Marignon's going to go, and you don't want to get into a two-front war intentionally. Unless, you know, you have a large enough advantage that you can bowl through and continue growing by fighting both of them at the same time. And the other thing which I'm starting to consider is that, given how large Arco is, and the fact that Pythium doesn't at least seem to be eating anyone at the moment, I might want to leave Arcocephaly embroiled in this war with Ulm, if Ulm does have a chance of actually, you know, doing anything in this war. So I might, like, you know, send Ulm some money or gems, if he can use them, in order to get him to actually hold off Arcocephaly for longer, in order to keep Arco occupied while I fight Mary. But for now, I'm still just staying neutral, and in spite of the fact that I was basically gifted this province as a means of fighting Ulm. These Lizard Warriors here means that at least one of these is a Lizard Shaman province, which is actually something that I want to get a hold of. And Lizard Warriors, because they don't have shields and their armor is relatively light, are actually not that great against ranged units. So if all I need to kill these guys is basically send a bunch of crossbows and I should be set. Oh, and I'm going to make my go for, or I'm going to send a scout onto this throne here just basically to see what's here. And, yeah, I'll keep building up these alchemists. And that's the turn. Alright, and this is turn 19 of I equipped my heavy crossbow. Here I'm just scouting a throne. I notice that there's these two sorceresses on it. And then, yeah, otherwise this province actually doesn't look that hard. I should be able to take it shortly once I get my army a bit further together. So this priest has a fire sword. That's kind of interesting. The sorceresses... Okay, so this one's got death magic and a ton of gems. I don't think that the AI likes casting Winds of Death, otherwise this could be a very annoying province to take. But she can definitely summon air elementals and spam skeletons at me. This sorceress If she were the type to cast Power of the Spheres, then she could also summon size 6 Fire Elementals and Earth Elementals, but I don't think that the AI does that, so she's probably just going to burn those gems on... or she's probably not going to use these Fire and Earth gems to do anything too scary, maybe summon some of the smaller Elementals. And yeah, anti-magic isn't going to be an issue. They've only actually got a couple of these crossbowmen here. Looks like, let's see, 7. So yeah, not scary at all. And then these guys, while they are ethereal, which means that they can avoid 3/4 of attacks, their weapon is magic resistance negates, which means it's even less likely to do damage than a regular 10 damage weapon. And they also have only 1 hit point, so flaming arrows can get through them quite easily. Here, Marignon reconnected his forces, basically. This is the dude that was bringing up guys from his capital, and these were the 2 guys who we saw on his castle. So he is just deathballing even harder, rather than spreading out. Normally the counter to deathballing is to just move around him, take all of his stuff, and yeah, otherwise not worry about him. Because it basically means that you're covering less territory by keeping all of your troops in one ball. However, in this case, I know that I can actually win in the deathball versus deathball thing. I just have to actually bring all of my guys together. So I'm going to be doing that right over here. Once I have all of my troops together, I'll have a ton of sacreds. I'm going to hit Y here just to show everything that's coming in. I haven't actually bothered putting everything into formation yet because he doesn't have his guys actually in range of attacking this capital or this castle. But my expectation at this point was that he's going to move all his guys into here, and then we're going to have a big fight on his castle, and then I'll win, and then that will define the war. And yeah, so for now I'm basically just pulling everything together in expectation for that one big fight to come. And while this might... yeah, so while it's normally like suboptimal to make a big deathball like this, given that I know that mine can beat his, if I can actually get that fight to happen, then that basically ends the war more quickly, which is actually pretty important. Here I'm just bringing my remaining Tritons down to here, maybe to patrol away the unrest, but also because it lets them move more quickly into any of these provinces. So in case an indie attack or something does take one of my underwater provinces, I can respond to it fairly quickly. Here I am just about, or I'm a little more than halfway full with this Ekwipt squad. Once I'm in the range of having 40 guys, I can recruit an Ekwipt commander, and then start bringing them over to flank from the sea. Pythium's stuff doesn't actually look scary yet. I know that he's, because he took that giant bless, if he were planning on invading me, he would almost certainly not do so while keeping his snakes out of my, or away from my border. So, I know that he wants to take this throne, which I'm of course okay with. It's like smack dab in the middle of his territory aside from these water provinces. So while I do own the seas that are adjacent to them, I'm definitely not making any claim to that itself. Archocephaly actually agreed with my keeping this lake, and he's going to go for this one over here and move his amphibious units away. But he's still massing crossbowmen here because Archocephaly doesn't have their own national crossbowmen, so they want to find provinces with resource-efficient indie crossbowmen and build them up there. And you can see that Gath is doing the same thing for similar reasons. Tianchi, meanwhile, has reclaimed this fort. Gath moved off of it rather than actually take the fight, and we can see that these guys just kick off the couple soldiers holding onto it. Pythium is just probing a throne fort similar to like what I was just doing. And here we see Ulm's army. So that's a big blob of crossbows. And then he's also using his Vampire Queen and a Vampire Hero. Both of these are immortal, so he can either use them as thugs, which can die and then come back, or he can just use them as casters, depending on what paths they've got. Let me take a look and see what paths his Vampire Queen has. I don't think I've actually seen it yet. Oh, they both flew over. Okay. His Vampire Queen is Death 4, Blood 4. Okay. Well, I guess she can summon full-size vampires if nothing else. And then this guy's just a Blood 2. But unlike regular vampires, he comes with built-in armor in addition to his invulnerability. And he has even more regen than normal because he's not just any vampire. He's a brute and a butcher. His greatsword deals a bunch of damage given his high strength, so he's already kind of a thug, even though he doesn't have any equipment yet. I imagine that he'll probably be gearing him up a little bit. By comparison, the Vampire Queen has no protection because she is totally ungeared. With Death 4, she can probably cast some useful magic, even if it's only like Skelly Spam or Shadow Blasts, so I expect to see Olm transitioning to that as his research picks up. I found some magic sites here, so that's another Earth site and another Death site, which is great. Those are two of my favorite gem types for Agartha. And that's the turn. Alright, this is turn 20 for I equipped my heavy crossbow. We see we've got some conjuration going, so we're at level 2 so far, marching our way up to actually getting elementals and other useful stuff. Here in the Druidland we found the Cave of Ghouls. So this is an interesting site in that I can actually get ghouls for free if I bother sending a death mage in them. If I want to make use of it, I'll probably recruit one of these guys. But it's a relatively low value site since ghouls themselves aren't anything special. Free chaff is free chaff, as always, but I mean, it's basically on par with just having a reanimator. Here, it looks like I did actually guess wrong about what Mary's intentions were, and he moved up here. So this is actually showing off a downside of deathballing, even when I'm doing it in response to his own blobbing his troops together. By keeping all of my troops in one place, in this case just on my castle, I just didn't cover all of my territory, so I could have intercepted him here, and if I'd moved over just these two troops, or these two blocks of troops that were gathering here, and just let the guys that were up here go up here, even without the reinforcements coming up this way, I still would have had plenty to take on this army. So yeah, in this case it wasn't like too big of a deal, but yeah, I lost a province for free essentially. Here in Snowford we took the throne. So basically, in order to avoid having my valuable necromancer get shot again, I have the crossbowmen actually in front of the blind fighters. So while they're not going to be moving forward much, since they're just shooting back at the enemy crossbows, they are being, hit, taking damage, all that bad stuff. And the enemy infantry squads are also locked onto them. I had them set to fire archers basically to try to remove the enemy archers, and hopefully take out the commanders in the process. My blind fighters are really unimpressed with these javelins, and fortunately, the fact that they were that they locked onto this heavy infantry squad means that they moved up rather than let the heavy infantry go for my commander when they're finished with scaring my crossbowmen away. Crossbowmen are of course not great in melee combat, so nothing surprising there. My blind fighters, by comparison, are. So yeah, they can take on the heavy infantry and light infantry squads no problem. And since my crossbowmen had already routed the enemy crossbowmen, there's no armor-piercing fire raining onto their heads, and soon enough the Indie army routes. So I've taken over this throne province. I'm deciding not to actually go after Ulm, because I think that it's a good thing that he's keeping Arcocephaly busy. Arco being one of the three major powers in the game at this point, I definitely want him to be occupied for as long as possible, and Ulm is in fact making progress even. Here he's using the fact that these two guys are immortal to basically use them as just light thugs hitting this unguarded province, which presumably is in his dominion. And if Arcocephaly did move up, it still wouldn't really cost him all that much, since these guys would both just respawn. And against light amounts of province defense, they have no trouble life-stealing and regenerating through whatever damage slips through their invulnerability. Here we can see Pythium taking on a throne province. This is actually quite similar to the throne province that I had scouted over near Gath, and it bodes well that Pythium was able to take it without even using his super sacreds. These are just regular Limitanes and Limitane Solaris, which are just Limitanes with like fire resistance and marginally better stats. So as you can see, the Phantasmal Warriors are avoiding a bunch of the hits, but they're not doing anything scary. And the rest of the Indie army is just normal Indie units. So yeah, Nothing to concern oneself with. It also gives me an idea for what these guys are going to cast, because even with gems, she's just casting Mind Burn and stuff. I think that what might be going on here is that there's actually too few Pythium units to trigger gem spending. Well, that might be it. Or actually, no, I think that the AI just doesn't value any spells that they can cast with gems. So yeah, this bodes well. So yeah, I should be able to take on the similar province type that I've got without any trouble. Here we've got some bad events, so yeah, yet more in that whole misfortune spiral thing. And then here, this is actually the same event that you get when someone casts a spell on you that increases heat. But in this case, we can presume that it's just a natural event. And so this is a throne province, which means that it's more likely to have magic sites, so he's going to search it. And these crossmen which routed, I'm going to have to go gather up before I do anything. That actually does also provide an excuse for not fighting Ulm right away, but I'm also not just super worried about people being too upset with me about my not doing anything about Ulm instantly, given that I am fighting Marignon as well. So yeah, Pythium still hasn't pulled Hydras up, so I'm not particularly concerned. It looks like he lost this province to an indie event. This is the event where like a local lord tries to take over. Hopefully he's not too worried about my Ichthyids, but soon enough I'll be pulling them away. I'll just finish up some recruitment and then, yeah, get an amphibious commander for them. So these are Fire Drakes, which have a large AoE breath weapon attack. It fires in a line, so it can hit like a bunch of units at once and deals armor-piercing fire damage. It might not do enough damage to actually kill blind fighters reliably, and it's also relatively short range. Given that they're undisciplined, they will most likely not be all too threatening, since they could definitely just die to crossbow fire. And I am moving my Death Ball onto Marignon. I did finally fix my formation here. So I've got most of my archers, or all of my archers actually, in skirmish formation. And as I'd mentioned earlier, I'm making a bowl with which to catch Marignon's army, given that he's got his lines formation in the middle. So I'll basically be enveloping his army, both with regular units, or my melee units, and a whole bunch of crossbowmen to rain down just withering fire on them. The crossbowmen that are moved further forward are set to fire, I think, just at random. Yeah, so these guys here are just set to fire, which means that they're going to pick a random squad. This gives them a higher chance of targeting commanders. The guys set to fire archers are typically the ones who I want behind my troops. This means that they're going to basically be pushing forward and standing behind my infantry, which isn't necessarily great, but yeah, given Marignon's formation, they should be getting within range of the archers when the archers are within range of the infantry. So if he has them set to fire archers, then they'll just be basically trading shots, which might still go in my favor, given that my archers are, or my crossbowmen are generally better than Marignon's, given that they have these higher damage steel crossbows. And instead of just hitting yet more crossbow squads, they'll also be raining arrows that miss down on the heads of my infantry, which, while not ideal, is definitely something that they can survive. And yeah, these guys here at the front are functioning as flankers. So the cavalry here actually do have at least some chance of slipping by the enemy lines to hit the archers. These guys are going to be waddling forward quite slowly, but moving steadily towards the back. If they get intercepted by enemy units, then that's also totally okay, since their whole job is to die and become cave drakes anyways. And that's the turn. We'll see how the battle goes.